Oh, there was the cutest little chickadee picking at the snow and it just flew away. I was going to turn it around and show you, but they see the littlest movement and they're gone. Anyways, my friends, thank you for being here. I've been wanting to create a story about a mouse for a while, and I don't know why. It's just sort of when I think of story ideas, a mouse keeps coming to my mind. And I thought, what would be really cute and cozy? Well, baking. Baking seems to be a really nice, cozy thing to do on a cold winter's day. So I've created a story about a mouse and her pups. And I didn't realize pups were baby mice, but it's super cute. And they're baking cookies and just having a lovely day together. And so I hope that this story brings you some joy, some peace, and maybe some good sleeps. Again, if you haven't subscribed, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel, like this video, and put a comment below. Let me know what you think and where you're listening from. Thanks for being here. My next story will come out next Tuesday at 8 o'clock, so turn on those notifications. All right, friends, enjoy. I'll talk to you soon. Tonight, we'll step into a cozy winter world filled with warmth, love, and the smell of freshly baked cookies. But before we join Margie and her little ones in their snug mouse house, let's take a moment to ease into the stillness, leaving behind the busyness of the day. Find a comfortable position, perhaps lying down under a blanket or nestled into your favorite chair. Let your body settle into support, allowing yourself to relax completely. Now, take a slow, deep breath in through your nose. Feel the coolness of the air as it fills your lungs. And then gently exhale through your mouth, letting go of any tension in your shoulders, your jaw, or anywhere else you may feel it. Let's do that again. Inhale deeply and exhale slowly as if you're blowing out a candle. With each breath, feel yourself softening, settling deeper into relaxation. As you breathe naturally now, bring your awareness to the quiet sounds around you. Maybe it's the faint hum of your room, the rustle of fabric, or the gentle rhythm of your own breathing. Let these sounds remind you of the stillness of winter, a peaceful hush that wraps everything in calm. Now, imagine yourself in a snowy forest. You're walking along a path lined with tall trees, their branches heavy with sparkling snow. The air is crisp, but not too cold, and each step you take leaves a soft crunch underfoot. Feel the weight of the world melting away like snowflakes dissolving into the warmth. And with every breath, you draw in peace and release any lingering worries. As you continue along this quiet path, you see a warm glow ahead. It's a tiny house, nestled under the roots of a grand oak tree. The windows shimmer with golden light, and a thin wisp of smoke curls up from the chimney. You can smell something sweet and comforting in the air. Freshly baked cookies and the faint scent of wood smoke. This is where our story begins. In this cozy place of love, laughter, and the simple joys of a winter's day. Now, when you're ready, let's join Margie and her little ones in their burrow. Deep in the snow-covered hillside, nestled under the roots of a sprawling old oak tree, there was a cozy mouse house. The home belonged to Margie, a kind and cheerful field mouse with a talent for baking. Her little ones, 3 curious, excitable mouse pups named Pip, Penny, and Poppy, were her constant companions, always eager to help in the kitchen, especially on cold wintry days like today. The burrow was warm and inviting, filled with the faint aroma of pine and cinnamon. The front door was a perfectly round piece of bark, polished smooth by years of use, with a tiny wreath made of dried holly berries, twigs hanging from it. Inside, the walls were lined with shelves carved directly into the earthen walls, holding jars of grain, nuts, dried fruits, and spices. Tiny curtains made of soft, worn flannel in red and white checks hung over the small windows, which let in just enough winter light to illuminate the space without losing its warmth. A stone hearth sat at the center of the home, crackling with a cheerful fire. Above it hung a copper kettle, its handle worn smooth from years of Margie's tea making. Around the hearth, Margie had placed tiny knitted cushions and a patchwork rug, all sewn together from scraps of fabric she'd found over the years. The ceiling was strung with dried flowers and herbs, their faint fragrances mingling with the warmth of the fire. Margie herself was a picture of comfort and care. She wore a soft green woolen dress with an apron tied snugly around her waist, its pockets bulging with small wooden spoons and bits of string. A pale yellow scarf was wrapped around her neck, and her ears peeked out from under a knit bonnet that Poppy had insisted was her favorite because it had tiny acorns embroidered on it. As the snow fell softly outside, Margie stood on her tiptoes, reaching for a jar of flour on the highest shelf. "Today's the perfect day for baking cookies," she said, her whiskers twitching with delight. "Chocolate chip, I think. What do you 3 say?" "Yes," squeaked Pip, already dragging the wooden stool towards the counter. "Can we put walnuts in them too, Mama?" asked Penny, who loved the crunch that they added. "And extra chocolate chips," chimed in Poppy, bouncing on her tiny feet. Margie laughed, brushing a bit of flour from her apron. "Of course, Let's gather everything we need. The mice worked together to bring out the ingredients, each item carefully selected from the shelves. First came the jar of fine white flour, soft as powder and stored in an acorn cap, fitted with tiny bark lid. Then they retrieved a small stone jar of brown sugar, its sweetness filling the air as Margie popped off the cork. Next came the precious block of butter, kept cool in the snow outside, and a tiny vial of vanilla extract, which Margie had traded for at the market last summer. The chocolate chips were the real treasure. Margie had saved them from a special treat given by a kind human family that often left scraps for the woodland creatures. Each tiny morsel was a dark, glossy brown, and the pups couldn't help but nibble on a few while Margie wasn't looking. "We'll also need an egg," Margie said, her tail curling as she stepped toward the little pantry. She opened a woven basket and carefully lifted out a single quail egg, speckled and smooth. "And some walnuts for Penny." She handed her daughter a bag of finely chopped nuts. As they arranged the ingredients on the wooden counter, Margie noticed the pups shivering slightly. "Oh, my dears, let's warm up a bit before we start," she said, ladling warm peppermint tea from the kettle into their tiny acorn cups. They sipped quietly by the fire, the steam tickling their nose, as Margie laid out her favorite wooden mixing bowl and a long-handled spoon. With the snow still falling and the fire crackling softly, the stage was set for an afternoon of baking magic. The little kitchen was alive with excitement as Margie tied fresh aprons around her pups. Pip wore one with a bold red gingham pattern. Penny's had tiny embroidered daisies, and Poppy's was blue with mismatched buttons down the front. "Now remember, clean paws," Margie said with a wink, watching the pups scurry to the wash basin carved into the stone counter. Tiny towels hung from hooks beside it, and soon all three mice were drying their paws eagerly. Margie placed the big wooden mixing bowl in the center of the counter. "First, the butter," she said, slicing the cool golden block into smaller pieces with a sharp seashell knife. Poppy dropped the butter chunks into the bowl, giggling as one piece stuck to her paw. "It's slippery, Mama," she squeaked. Next came the sugar. "Pip, can you measure a cup of brown sugar, please?" Margie asked, and Pip stood on the wooden stool, gripping the tiny acorn cup they used for measuring. He scooped the sugar carefully from the stone jar, leveling it off with the edge of a popsicle stick before pouring it in. "Perfect," Margie said, patting his head. As Margie began to cream the butter and sugar together with her long-handled spoon, the pups gathered around, watching the mixture turn smooth and fluffy. Penny, ever the curious one, asked, "Mama, why do we mix it so much?" Margie smiled. "Well, my dear, this helps make the cookies soft and delicious. It's like waking up all the flavors so they can dance together. The pups giggled at the thought of dancing cookies. Now, who will crack the egg? Margie asked, holding up the speckled quail egg. Penny raised her paw eagerly. With gentle guidance from Margie, Penny tapped the egg against the side of the bowl until it cracked, letting the yolk and the whites slip neatly into the mixture. Good job, Penny, Margie cheered. Pip was in charge of adding the vanilla extract. He carefully unscrewed the tiny vial and tipped it over the bowl, his nose twitching at the sweet, heady scent. Just a drop more, Margie said, and Pip let the golden liquid trickle in. The pups took turns sifting the flour into the bowl, using a fine mesh sieve made of spider silk stretched over a willow frame. Clouds of flour dusted the air, making everyone sneeze and laugh. I look like a snow mouse, said Poppy, shaking her flour-dusted fur. Margie handed Penny the walnuts to sprinkle in while Pip gently folded in the chocolate chips. Now, remember, Margie said, her tone playful, no nibbling until the cookies are baked. And suddenly, as Poppy was stirring the mixture, a tiny plop came from the hearth. Margie and the pups turned to see a small, soot-covered bird fluttering out of the chimney, narrowly missing the fire, thankfully. It was a young sparrow, shivering and looking quite startled. Oh, you poor thing! You must have been drawn to the warmth of the chimney, Margie exclaimed, quickly setting her spoon aside. The pups gasped with delight. A visitor, said Pip. Margie grabbed a soft cloth and gently wrapped it around the sparrow. You must have gotten caught in the snowstorm, she said soothingly. Let's get you warm and cozy. The pups helped set a little nest near the hearth, using scraps of fabric and dried moss. The sparrow chirped softly, nestling into the warmth. Can he stay while we bake? Asked Penny. Of course, Margie said. He can rest here as long as he needs. And with their unexpected guest settled in, they returned to the cookie dough. Margie showed the pups how to roll small balls of dough and place them on a baking tray lined with parchment made from birch bark. Leave space between them, Margie reminded them. They like room to spread out. The pups worked carefully, their tiny paws rolling the dough into perfectly round shapes. It's like making snowballs, Pip said, his tail flicking happily. Once the tray was full, Margie slid it into the warm oven built into the hearth. The heat of the fire gave the room a golden glow, and the scent of baking cookies began to fill the air, mingling with the faint peppermint from their tea. As they waited, Margie told the pups stories of winter days from when she was young, of skating on frozen ponds and sledding down hills on makeshift sleds made from walnut shells. The sparrow chirped softly, as if listening to the tales. When the cookies were finally ready, the golden brown treats emerged from the oven, their chocolate chips gleaming and their edges slightly crisp. Margie placed them on a cooling rack made of twigs, and the pups hovered nearby, their noses twitching impatiently. But just as Margie was about to let them taste their creation, the sparrow hopped from his nest and fluttered onto the counter. He chirped a happy little tune, as if to say, "Thank you." Margie smiled. "It seems our friend approves," she said. "Can we share a cookie with him?" Poppy asked. "I think he'd like that," Margie replied. She broke off a tiny piece and placed it in front of the sparrow, who nibbled at it gratefully. As the family and their new feathered friend enjoyed the first warm bites of cookie, Margie looked around at her little kitchen, filled with love, laughter, and the comforting scent of home. "There's nothing better than baking together," she said softly. The snow had finally stopped falling, leaving the world outside Margie's burrow wrapped in a sparkling white blanket. Sunlight peeked through the bare branches above, making the snow glisten like tiny diamonds. Inside the cozy mouse house, the pups were busy, helping Margie pack cookies into little bundles. Each bundle was wrapped in squares of soft cloth, tied with twine and adorned with sprigs of pine and holly berries. "These cookies are so warm and lovely," Margie said as she tied the last bundle. "I think our neighbours will enjoy a little surprise today." Pip's whiskers twitched with excitement. "Can I carry the basket, Mama?" "You may, Pip," Margie replied, handing him a woven basket lined with dried moss to keep the bundles snug. "But be careful not to spill them." The pups bundled up for the journey. Margie tied little scarves around their necks. Pip's was plaid, Penny's had snowflakes stitched onto it, and Poppy's was a bright yellow that matched her bonnet. They each wore tiny felt boots to keep their paws warm, and Margie pulled on her own soft cloak, fastening with a button carved from walnut wood. With the sparrow chirping a cheerful goodbye from his nest by the hearth, the little family set off into the snow. The pups dashed ahead, their tails flicking playfully as they left tiny paw prints in the powdery snow. Margie carried a small lantern to light their way under the shadow of the oak's broad branches. The first stop was at Mrs. Thistle's burrow. Nestled under a tangle of brambles, Mrs. Thistle, a gentle hedgehog, was delighted to see them. "Oh, what a treat!" she exclaimed, her quills bristling with joy as she accepted the bundle. "You're too kind, Margie, and such helpful little ones." The next visit was to the family of voles who lived in the hollow of a log by the stream. The pups giggled as the vole children crowded around, their noses twitching at the scent of the cookies. "Mama, can we try one now?" one of the little voles squeaked. "Not until after supper," their mother replied, laughing. "Thank you, Margie. These will make our evening extra special." The final delivery was to Mr. Birch, a wise old squirrel who lived high in the pine tree. Margie and the pups climbed the winding path to his front door, carrying the basket carefully. Mr. Birch opened the door with a wide smile. "Ah, visitors! And bearing gifts, no less." He sniffed the bundle appreciatively. "Chocolate chip cookies, my favorite. Thank you, my friends. By the time they headed home, the pups were tired but happy. The cold air made their noses pink and their scarves damp with melted snow. Mama, do you think everyone liked the cookies? Penny asked as she skipped alongside Margie. I'm sure they did, Margie said, squeezing her daughter's paw. Sometimes the smallest gestures bring the most joy. And when they returned to the burrow, the warmth of the fire welcomed them like a hug. Margie helped the pups remove their damp scarves and boots, hanging them near the hearth to dry. The sparrow chirped softly from his nest, fluttering his wings as if to greet them. Margie poured warm milk into tiny acorn cups for each pup and brought out the last few cookies. The pups snuggled under a big knitted blanket on the patchwork rug, their tails curling as they took small, happy bites. The fire crackled softly, casting a golden glow over the little family. Mama, this was the best day ever, Poppy said, her voice sleepy. Margie smiled, brushing a crumb from her apron. The best days are the ones we spend together, she said. Now, finish your milk, my loves. It's time to rest. One by one, the pups dozed off, their little heads resting against each other under the blanket. Margie sat quietly by the fire, listening to the gentle rhythm of their breathing and the soft whisper of the wind outside. She took one last nibble of a cookie, savoring its warmth and sweetness, before blowing out the lantern and wrapping the blanket around herself. Outside, the snow glowed faintly in the moonlight, and all was calm. Inside the cozy mouse house, Margie and her little ones slept peacefully, their hearts full of love and the simple joy of a winter's day well spent.